Everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Emanuela. I'm the Industrial Experience and Study Abroad Manager at Queen Mary, and today I'm joined by six amazing panelists who will tell us about being a woman in finance. So we'll start with some introductions. So if I can ask you all to briefly introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your journey and what you do in your current role. So I'll go in order of who I see in my screen, if that's okay. So Beatrice, if you could go first. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name's Beatrice Russ, and I'm a partner in a law firm specializing in asset and project finance. I started in finance in the early to mid 90s, so I think most of you are probably considerably younger. And just to sort of give you an idea, my friend I started out with, who was sharing a flat with me, was working at the Life Exchange, which was literally a life exchange. They, as traders, they went in and they traded there on the day, and it was very full on, quite different from today where everything just happens on the computers. When I started, I didn't have a computer at my desk. Computers were only for very important people, and there certainly wasn't any internet access. So you were doing a lot of dictation, and you were doing a lot over the telephone. The fax machine was your best friend. And also, on my very first day when I started, I walked into the office to meet the other trainees, and I had a bit of a shock because I had been to an all-girls school. College had been a bit difficult. There had not been quite as many girls, but still plenty. But on that first day, everyone was just towering above me, and they were only guys. And I thought, oh my God, where have all the women gone? It was such a shock. You cannot imagine it, because you'd never think, when I accepted the job or when I applied for the job or accepted it, it had never occurred to me when I walked around the office that the majority of the females you saw around were the secretaries, and all the fee earning roles were carried out mainly by men. So fortunately, that was almost 30 years ago, and we've moved on a lot further. And I thought, well, with this panel, I think it's a good idea, though, still, because although we've come a very long way from those days where you walk into a room and it's all males, it's still the case that at a lot of conferences, in a lot of firms, and a lot of banks, I do a lot of meetings on a day-to-day basis, and very often I will be the only female in the room. And it can be a bit intimidating, but the more of us do this and the more of us are there, the less intimidating it will be, the more natural it becomes. I'm so excited to talk to people of your age, your generations, seeing how much further it's moved along. A lot of the things, you can think what you want about Me Too and these things. We had some unfortunate episodes with men who'd, put their hands where they didn't belong, and you didn't have much power in those days to say, oh, no, don't do that. So you try and remove yourself from the situation. All of these things have actually manifestly changed. Also, I remember when I had my first child, my daughter, it was just almost impossible because you couldn't get part-time work in those days. And so you had the decision, either you go out full-time, go back in, and in finance, it meant in those days, and I think it still does to an extent, that you have to be prepared to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week sometimes, if you're on a stressful transaction, which needs to get carried across the line. And so you don't have much time to bring up your children. What I did at the time is I did it for about 3 years, and then I wouldn't say I capitulated, but I moved sideways into the civil service and joined the government UK Export Credits Department, which does a lot of finance, mostly by providing credits to exporters, support British exports. And that was a different environment, a very good environment. You work in teams. You know, you've got your credit analyst, you've got your lawyer, you've got your underwriter, and you all work hand in hand, relieving the pressure off each other. And I have to say, for me, that was a wonderful experience because for the first time, I was in a working environment which was, well, almost made for mothers, like I was at the time, where you didn't have to be on call 24 hours a day, where you could actually step out. And I have to say, I haven't looked back since. I work full time now. My children are grown up. My daughter, you know, is the age of few students. She's about to start as a teacher, and so it's a different story. But I try and still maintain some private life, which the computers, the laptops, and even the mobile phones we are all on have made possible, which wasn't possible when I started out, and I'm very grateful for that. So I was asked to just give you an idea of what you do on a day-to-day basis. I suppose it's quite different now than it was previously, before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I did do a lot of travel, some of it very mundane, quite boring. You meet people, you make contact with people, you talk about business and see and try and explore whether there's sufficient commonality of interest to do business together. Some of them exciting ones where you are actually on a transaction, and these transactions in the finance world, particularly in the international sectors, can be huge. I think my biggest one so far was 1.5 billion, which was construction finance of some new technology, combining it with existing technology for an offshore platform. You have highs. My high was so far, I think, standing on top of the TV tower in Shanghai and toasting a transaction which was the first one of its kind. Very exciting with the clients. You have lows, which is usually about 3 o'clock in the morning when you're brooding over documentation, trying to make some spreadsheet to make sense, and they just don't want to fit in with what you've been told by the client. And you think, oh my God, how can I make this work? I think the one thing about a career in finance for me is it has never been boring. There has always been something exciting. Not always the figures or the words or the written word on the screen or on the paper, but usually the people. They make it interesting and exciting. And I've also learned that if it's not interesting and exciting, it's time to move on and try and do something else. I think that's it for me from day to day.
Thank you. That was
summary.
Very, very interesting, and definitely we'll get to that exciting versus boring later on. Some really good points there. Silvia, if I can ask you now to briefly introduce yourself and tell us about what you do.
Yes, sure. So nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Silvia Piva. I'm a fixed income portfolio manager for 24 Asset Management, which is code for saying that I make and manage investments for the clients of my firm, which is an asset manager. I do specialize in asset-backed securities, which are also known as securitization, which some of you, albeit you're all very young, but some of you may remember was the villain of the last financial crisis, so it's all very exciting. I like my job. I do day-to-day, my activities change on a daily basis because my job is project-driven. And so it depends on what I'm doing. Generally, it's a transaction, but it could be I'm purchasing something, or I'm financing something, or I'm refinancing something, or I'm slightly changing something. in one of the investments that we have. So I will be doing different things on a daily basis, but they will all broadly have to do with negotiating commercial terms, reading legal documentation, checking spreadsheets, and spending a lot of time on the phone. In a way, when Beatrice was talking about technology, we just take it for granted. We've got a computer in front of us. I do not even think about, that's what I use to work. I just think I'm on the phone all the time, but actually I'm in front of a computer all day long. And then when I come home again. So yeah, that's interesting. I've been working in the city for 15 years. I was in investment bank before, and then I made the move and came into asset management. And I know probably even if your course of studies talks about these type of companies, I know there's a bit of confusion in a way, or lack of clarity. Being 15 years in the city, you know what you're talking about. There's a lot of different jobs within each of these type of companies. But when you come from university, you think, what's the difference between a bank, an asset manager, an hedge fund, or an accounting firm? What is the difference, and what job can I do there? So I'm happy to provide a bit more of clarity, whether it's this forum or afterwards, if you just want to contact me if you've got questions, because it can be pretty tricky to navigate all that. It's not female or male. It's just pretty tricky. So yeah, that's pretty much, that's me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Silvia, and thank you for the offer. I do encourage students to take you up on that offer if they're interested in navigating the industry a bit better. And now I have Shanita. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Shanita. I was actually a student at Queen Mary. I graduated 2019, so just before the pandemic. Once I graduated, it's very much like Silvia was saying, I was one of those students that didn't know my way around the industry. So it was kind of just apply for a job and see where it takes me. I had an interest in finance. I did economics, so I knew that was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't really know the difference, between what's a hedge fund, do I want to work in an investment bank? What do I want to do? So I somehow got a job as an accountant assistant at a management consultancy, where I worked in accounts receivable. It was very much invoice based, and I worked with a couple of clients, and that kind of strengthened my interest in finance. I knew that was something that I wanted to do. And then I started applying for graduate roles, and I got my current role, which is I'm a finance graduate at Santander. So day to day, I just moved on to my second rotation in the grad scheme, but the first one I worked in the mortgage division. So I was involved in mortgage pricing, doing evaluations. I was involved in preparing budgets and forecasts. So I wouldn't do it myself, but I, assist as a finance grad. And now in my second rotation, I'm in the group reporting team. So we report to our head office in Spain, where we consolidate all of our finances from all the different entities within Santander, and then we send it to our Spain team. On a day-to-day basis, I very much live and breathe Excel. I think that's the one software that I use the most. I can't say I haven't got sick of it yet, but maybe when it's month end, I'll probably not be saying the same thing when I'm working quite late. But yeah, I think compared to obviously Beatrice and Silvia, I've kind of just started my journey in finance, so I don't actually know anything apart from the 2 years that I've been working, obviously. But I know what it was like to be a student and scrambling for a job. Even, I know, especially now, after the pandemic, I've heard people say that it's even harder to get a job. And I know that it's not as bad as it used to be in terms of the split between men and women, but there's obviously still a long way to go. So obviously, I guess we'll get to that somewhere through the event, but happy to talk to any students who want to know what it was like applying for a job or getting into finance itself. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much, Shanita. It's great to have you as a recent graduate. You can definitely bring your very recent experience of applying for jobs, and that's really valuable. Next on, Siobhan, would you like to go next?
Yeah,
I hope I said your name correctly.
yes, you did. Hi, I'm Siobhan. I'm a managing associate at INT. So actually, Beatrice and I are in the same team. And I started my journey, I did a law degree, and then I applied for training contracts. And from there, I worked for a firm in the South Coast, on the South Coast. And I was qualified into their shipping team. And then I moved up to London to a regional firm, and then I moved to INT. So INT is the third place that I've worked. And I work in the finance team, and I am a transactional and finance super yacht lawyer. So it's just a different asset class. It's a moving asset class. So it's slightly complicated, but I buy and sell yachts and big fancy super yachts, and finance them and refinance and anything really to do with that the clients want us to do. What else do I need to tell you? It has changed. It's changed even in the 14 years that I've been qualified. The only trend that I see now is that it's slightly different from when Beatrice started, that there were actually more girls than boys in my trainee intake. But as the years go by, people drop off. And actually, then when you look at the boardroom, it's still very heavily male dominated, because lots of women drop out for various different reasons. But that's one thing that that's why I'd like to take part in things like this, is to encourage more women to join, and then kind of encourage each other to kind of stick with it, because it is really interesting. I really like my job. And I know that I'm lucky to say that. Don't get me wrong, it's not every day that I'm, singing its praises, but it's something that suits me very well. And I deal with transactional work, so it's kind of ups and downs. But it is a big high when you
Google it, for fuck's sake.
Why would I want to Google that?
Women in finance.
Sorry about that. I thought that all participants were muted upon entry, but now we should be. Please
Okay.
go on.
That's all right. I think that was probably the end. It's a good segue to finish, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Siobhan. And then Rashmi, would you like to tell us a bit about you and your job?
Yeah, very happy to. Can you all hear me all right? Okay. I'm currently a director in the enterprise go-to-market team at WorldPay from FIS, so in payments of the broader finance and fintech world. My career started many years ago. I was an aerospace engineer in India. Also another industry with a lot of gender balance issues. I was one of the 2 women in the class of 50, something like that. So very, very interesting experience. Like a lot of other engineering students, I quickly realized that my passion doesn't necessarily lie in engineering. I was drawn to more people-driven, meeting, a lot of like teams, things like that, big picture thinking and strategy, that kind of thing. And that led me to do an MBA in the US. Following that MBA, I did a year at Dell doing some project management work in their supply chain group. And then I moved to Bain, where I was doing management consulting for 3 years. One of those years was in New York, and then I transferred to London after that. And I was there 2 more years, so 3 years in total. And that was the point when a lot of consultants ask that question on, do I want to do the partner track and stay in consulting and make it my life, or do I want to try something different? And I looked around and looked at all the industries, and payments and fintech generally seemed like a very interesting, growing place to be. And I moved to WorldPay from FIS about 7 months ago now, towards the end of lockdown and who knows where we are, but end of the pandemic, hopefully. So I've been lucky that the time I've been at WorldPay, it's been mostly in person. I've been able to meet my team and stuff like that. At WorldPay, I lead the enterprise product commercialization team. So we have a team of 10, including me. And what we do is supporting our sales team. So we're a sales strategy support team in commercializing our value-added products. So our bread and butter is payments. So if you go online and click pay, all the stuff that happens in the background in taking it to your bank and making sure it's all good, that's what we do. But in addition to that, we have a lot of value-added products like fraud prevention, making sure your payments are secure, optimizing payments and things like that, which can add a lot of value to the merchants that we work with. So my team's job is knowing all those products, understanding where they can add the most benefit, which customers would benefit most from it, and making sure that the sales teams know all of these information when they go talk to a customer, so we can provide the most information, and then finding interesting insights and analyses and stuff like that. On a day-to-day basis, I think about 50-60% of my time is spent in people management. So I have a lot of one-on-ones with my team, thinking through the development, what else can I give them to push them further, what kind of feedback, that kind of thing, helping with their escalations and giving them guidance. And then maybe 10 to 20% in stakeholder management. We sit between product and sales and marketing and implementation and a lot of other teams. So that's a lot of making sure everybody is on the same page. Maybe another 20% on some cross-product initiatives, so standardization, process improvement, and stuff like that. And then I'd like to spend a little bit of time in, what I call company culture, extra 10 stuff. So organizing a Halloween party or whatever it is, those kind of things, to make sure that this is a company where I can make things happen and have fun at the same time. So that's me and my role in a nutshell.
Amazing, thank you very much. And finally, last but not least, Nikita.
Thanks. Hi guys, I'm Nikita. I have a very similar story, I guess, to Shanitha. Also graduated just a year after her from Queen Mary, having studied economics, and I'm now working at Barclays on a finance graduate scheme. It's also rotational, similar to hers, and I'm on my second rotation right now. So I guess starting off from the way I got into Barclays was I'd applied for a summer internship just after my second year of university. So I was there for 2 months in the summer, again in finance, and then I managed to get a return offer to come back the following year once I graduated. Interestingly, coming into the role as a graduate was very different because it was all virtual in the pandemic, but I can get onto that a bit later on the experience of coming in virtually. But my first rotation last year was within financial reporting. So again, as Shanitha mentioned, it's you're consolidating the group's results, and it's what essentially goes in the annual report. So I was fortunate enough to be given the responsibility to produce the cash flow statement for one of our Barclays subsidiaries, which sounds super daunting at first, but again, it's just a whole load of Excel. It's your bread and butter. And that was essentially my whole first rotation. And now I'm within the corporate bank. So it's a whole other part of Barclays to be working. And I guess that's the beauty of having a rotational graduate scheme. You get insights into, you have your technical insight, which is your financial control. And now I'm in the corporate bank, where it's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more things to get involved in. So the role in the corporate bank right now is within business management. And I wish I could give you one simple description of what business management is and what we actually do, but essentially a business manager can do anything and everything. You get a whole load of queries coming to you from the front office corporate bankers, and you're assisting them with their day-to-day tasks and analyzing essentially the results that they're producing. So that's kind of what I do right now. I've only been in this role for 1 month, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I think Beatrice mentioned she had a bit of a realization where she walked into a room and it was full of men, and I had a very similar experience a couple of years ago when I was doing a spring week with a certain organization, and it was a great spring week, very, very, I learned a lot from it. But walking into the room, there was 40 of us, and 37 of these people were men and 3 were female, including myself. And I just found that staggering. You know, 3 females across the whole cohort, across the whole country of people had been chosen for this spring week. And, you know, it's something that clearly needs to be worked on. And as much as we would like to think times are changing, which they are, but we've come a very long way over the past decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, but there still is a long way to go. And, you know, fortunately with my graduate employer now, I think I've been able to see a lot more diversity in terms of more females in the workplace, but it isn't the same across the whole sector, which is why I think, you know, having these sessions is so useful, just to be able to share experiences and, you know, across different sectors. And yeah, I think that's pretty much me.
Thank you so much, Nikita, and thank you all of you for sharing a bit of your experience. I would like to start with this point that Nikita's just mentioned and that a few of you have talked about, which is walking in a room full of men, which can be, obviously can be daunting, especially if you are at the start of your career, and can also put off a lot of girls, a lot of women to apply to finance roles. Would you, what helped you? So if you were able to give a few tips or talk about how you managed to overcome this difficulty and feel comfortable in an environment that is mostly male dominated. So yeah, I'll open the floor now. And if any of you would like to start first and talk about their experience, please go ahead.
Maybe I can take this. I would say it's something that I've learned in a way by experience, but I found that it helps to not try to fit in. So leverage who you are, what you think is right, because worst case, I would think, oh, it's a woman, so it's different, you know, but, you know, they will listen. I have actually, well, okay, I've worked in male-dominated environments all my life, so probably it's just all I know. But I do find that actually once you speak up, the diversity of what you're bringing to the table, because it is almost 100% of the times you're looking at something from a different angle, and it's not, you know, like it's just like cultural. And I'm also not being from the UK, I bring also that to the table, right? And you just realize people see things with different spectacles, and the diversity is appreciated. Of course, being polite, right? But even if you're a junior, don't be afraid. And to be honest, I think those 3 girls in that room, they were cherished by the people that organized the spring week. In our organization, we try to be as diverse as possible. We actually, like, even when I joined, it was a much smaller firm, and we already had like a non-UK partner, which, you know, I thought was amazing when I joined. And now we've put out, even on Twitter, like we've put out like the link to apply for our graduate program. We received, like, for each role, like, I don't know, 60+ applications, and my boss was telling me yesterday only 8 were female. I was surprised, because I thought in 2021 it's impossible that we don't have at least, you know, yeah, okay, maybe it's not going to be 50-50, but it's going to be, I was expecting it to be very close to 50-50. I mean, if you look at universities, like, male and female attendance is pretty much equal. I was really surprised, and I think it's just because female women think, oh, it's a male-dominated environment, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But actually, that's where you can make the difference. Not, you know, like, in the work environment, your career can benefit from that because you are different and you're bringing something different to the table. So value who you are.
I think I can agree with that, Silvia. I think be who you are is one of the most important things you can do. Never try and hide. If you're different in any way, like, for example, you know, if you come from a different country, like Silvia said, if you have a different colored skin than everyone else, if you're female, don't hide it. You are who you are. and that's an advantage. Another advantage where you can help yourself is, in my experience, be prepared. There's sort of, I don't know whether any of you heard this, fortune favors the brave. There's another interpretation of the original Greek which actually says fortune favors the well prepared. And I think when I talk about prepared, I don't just mean, oh, read everything there is and, you know, be academically the best or anything like that. Just be prepared in yourself. Think about it beforehand. Who do you think you're going to meet? What do you think is going to be discussed? Try and run a few things around in your head. Also, I always find, and I know this sounds terribly shallow, but dressing so that I feel comfortable in the situation. So, you know, some people feel most comfortable putting on a lot of makeup because it gives you like a sense of putting on some armor, like a medieval knight. But others don't feel comfortable with it, so I wouldn't do it. It's just if you feel that you look the part, it helps you be the part. I know it sounds like management consultant speak, but it is actually true. And it helps you to sort of mentally prepare when things are being thrown at you. And, you know, you do get, particularly, unfortunately, men who will try, and I wouldn't say put you down, but you get talked over if you're female. Your voice is a different pitch. So they sometimes perceive it as annoying. Doesn't matter, you can be as annoying as you want if the point you're bringing across is the right one. I've had the experience of somebody talking 5 minutes flat, me waiting for him to pause for breath, saying something, and then being told, don't interrupt me, you're always interrupting me. And you just say, what? Just don't be scared about things like that. If that happens to you, you can deal with it. All you say is you politely point out, yes, I would like to make this point now, please, and just carry on. And I think lots of little things like that will help you find the confidence to walk into that room and to cope with all the males. You know, I think it's something you learn over the years. We can tell you these things, and they all sound very good, and you can sit down and have the best of intentions, but really you have to experience it yourself. So if you've experienced it and it went wrong, don't worry, just put it down to experience. Next time will go better. Just never be put off, because every time something doesn't go exactly like you want it to go 100%, you can always learn something and take away from something and then be better prepared next time. Anyone agree or disagree?
I would 100% agree with that. It's experience. Unfortunately, it is just experience, and I had the experience, a couple of experiences where, especially when you go into a meeting room and they bring in the tea and coffee and they would put it at the end of the table, and I would be the only female in the room, and I would either get a kind of a side look as if, are you going to pour the tea? And for years I was like, oh yeah, I'll make the tea. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that's fine. And then after a time you think, well, why should I be pouring the tea? Why can't you all pour your own tea? Or why can't the most junior person in the room pour the tea? And then, you know, with experience, I would sit there and just make myself look busy until someone else felt uncomfortable enough to go and make the tea. But that's just experience. That's, you know, that's just one of those things. And the other thing I always remember is a partner that I worked for years ago told me that I had to get a thicker skin. I had to toughen up. And at the time I was like, oh my God, maybe this is just the wrong job for me. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe I'm not suited to this role. And actually it's only after years and years of doing it where you think, no, I don't have to change. It's not me that has to change. I mean, this guy was like a dinosaur. So, I mean, he's now retired, and so he's gone. And, you know, I'm part of the next generation. And you think, actually, one of the biggest things for me, my advice would be back yourself. You have got to go in there believing in yourself. And that's not always easy, because we all have days where, you know, we might get something wrong, or we might miss a deadline, or, you know, you just have a bad day or whatever. But when you walk into a room, or when you walk into a meeting where you speak to a client, you have to be there at least backing yourself up. One of the other things that really helped me was seeing other women above me doing the job. You cannot be what you cannot see. And if you see women in your role with a family and making it work, by no means are they making it, it's not easy. They may make it look easy, but it's not. But if you can see it, then you think, yeah, that's what I want to be. I want to be like that. And I think that's a really big indicator for women coming into finance or into these roles, that there are people that have kind of walked that path before you and hopefully smoothed it out slightly.
Yeah, I can only echo what all of you have already said. I think it's very much to do with your mindset as well and how you go into these things. Not using the fact that don't think of the fact that you're a female going into something as a deficiency, but almost use it as a power in a way. You're bringing something completely new to the table. You're bringing a different perspective. Don't think of it as in, oh my goodness, what are they going to think? I have a different idea. Everyone else is thinking the same thing, but I have a slightly different point of view. In actuality, your different point of view might be something which they haven't thought of yet. And I think the thing that I have found difficult so far, and I'm still navigating my way around it, is being able to get your voice heard in a room where it is full of males and you're trying to sort of say something. I'm still navigating, okay, at what point do I pitch in without seeming rude, without seeming like I'm interrupting someone? But males are able to do it so easily, and it's just something that, like you said, it comes with experience. You learn how to do it as you go along, and I'm still very much at the early stages of my career where I'm looking at how other females who are very successful in the organization are doing it, and I just stare in awe, like, oh my goodness, I would love to be able to do this. And it's something that comes with experience. So even if it's not something you can do right now, it's something that you'll be able to learn how to do and grow into. So don't think of that and let it put you off in any way. And one thing I've also found quite useful is when I came into my second rotation now in the corporate bank, there is a manager in my team who's a female, and she's great. She knows her work. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's the subject matter expert for most things in the team, and people go to her. And I was having a conversation with her quite recently, and she had also mentioned how being a female, even when she's a subject matter expert, it doesn't guarantee her that she's going to become a director very soon. It's still hard for her at that level to navigate her way, but it's about finding what's right for you and finding the right employee who can do it for you. And that's where sometimes change is needed. And it was just insightful hearing from her point of view, from her position, that how she's navigating her way around it and overcoming certain obstacles. So it's nice having an ally sometimes just to speak to these things about, who you relate to, who you can talk to any problems that you're facing, whether it's these certain situations or whatever it is. Just having that ally there to talk to, I think, is quite helpful.
Yeah, I've had informal and formal mentors and allies and promoters in all the companies that I've worked with, and I think that it could be men or women. Women tend to sympathize more, and they've been where you are, so it's helpful to have that perspective. But I think when you think about like promotions or lateral moves and stuff like that within the company, having somebody senior who can vouch for you and who will support you and say, actually, you know what, this person's really, really good, and having that push really helps. So if you're starting out your career, I would say that start early, make mentors, make allies, get coffee with people, just put time on people's calendar. Like if there are graduates who joined WorldPay, and some of them, come to me just for like, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. There's nothing on the agenda, but it's great because I know them now and I can help them if something comes up. And similarly, like taking it to one additional level is if you have a meeting, where a lot of men are going to be there, one thing that could be helpful is finding an ally in the meeting to say, sometimes I get interrupted. Can you just be a little bit conscious of that. And, you know, I do that sometimes in meetings where if junior people don't get the opportunity to speak, you can kind of tell if you look at someone's face that they were going to say something. And I feel comfortable interrupting the other person saying, hold on, she had something to say. So that could also be a tool that you can use. So I found that having both male and female allies and mentors and promoters within the company, or not just within the company, within the industry or within your broader network, really, really helps push things forward in your career.
I think I definitely echo what Rashmi just said. I mean, as someone who's just started my career, I completely understand what Nikita's talking about when you talk about, you know, you see people, managers or directors or whoever, and the first thing I think of is literally, oh my God, I want to be you. Like that, you're who I want to be when I grow up. That's kind of the first thing that comes to my head. But it's more having someone there to support you. I think that's probably one of the main reasons, I guess, why there aren't as many women in finance is because you kind of shy away from the opportunity. You think it's like, I think one of you mentioned earlier, you know it's more male dominated, so you just assume, oh, you know, I'm not going to get in anyway, so what's the point in even me applying to the role? But being female or being, you know, a little bit different, it's what sets you apart. And having that, I know in a meeting, you know, a while back when I was in the mortgage team, a lot of the mortgage division in my organization was predominantly male oriented, and I remember my manager saying, I know you're just a graduate, but if you've got something to say, just say it. Just don't even, you know, think about, you know, a director's talking, it's fine, because your insight is very valuable. And I think that's something that I'd want to echo to students now as well. Like your experience, we're technically the future. So everyone who's, you know, studying at university now, when you start out your career, you think you don't really know anything. And well, I think I don't know anything, but, you know, you go into meetings and you think your job there is to learn, but someday the people that you're talking about, oh, you know, I want to be that person, you know, in the future, that will hopefully be you. So it's just good to sort of pick up these tips and set an example to people that are going to follow you. So like the people on this call right now, so that you can become the future of finance as well. Because all experience is good experience. So yeah.
Great, thank you all. I think some really, really good tips here. I would like to move on to a slightly different topic, which is something that Beatrice mentioned earlier, and that's preparation. So when we talk about careers with students, we always talk about skills and abilities that they should try and develop, and then show during interviews and what's helpful in the finance world. So I'd be interested to know from you what sort of skills and abilities have helped you get where you are, but also how did you develop them? What do you think is important now for graduates to have achieved by the time that they graduate and start applying for jobs? Again, if anyone would like to start first, otherwise
Nikita. Yeah, sure, I don't mind kicking off. It's a very small, probably slightly different point to what you're normally thinking of when you think of skills, but one thing that I've learned and wish I did more of at the start was don't be afraid to show off like what you've done, because as a female, or maybe it's just me myself, you know, over the past couple of years of my career, whenever I've done something that's quite good, I tend to downplay it a bit, and I don't really show off to the seniors around me who should be knowing and, you know, what you've been doing, and not in like a I'm boasting I've done this amazing thing way, but just kind of letting them know, oh, I took part in this, I led this and did it myself, because that's how you get your name out there, and they know, okay, yeah, she's worked on this deal, she assisted with whatever it was, and they keep your name in mind. And yeah, that's something that I learned as I went along. And, you know, recently I did a panel session with someone quite senior in my organization, and my manager said to me, oh, we should really let the wider team know about this, you know, it's a really great piece to have been involved in. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I feel so awkward, like I don't know how to tell everyone that I've done this. And he was like, you know, sometimes there's no one way to go about it. There's there's so many ways that you could approach it. He was like, I could send out an email letting everyone know you've done this. So sometimes having someone else do it for you as well helps. But, you know, it's just something that I've learned. I'm still learning how to go about it. But yeah, don't be afraid to let people know when you've done something that's worthy of them knowing about.
That's very good advice. Yeah, no, I think again, preparedness is one of the things. And if you think about beforehand, what skills do I already possess? What have I done in my life that helps me? But I think one big factor, I used to do a lot of recruitment, so a lot of interviews and things. And I always look for interpersonal skills, people who are able to relate to me as the interviewer there. You know, I'm taking an hour out of a busy day to interview you. So I quite like to be, well, I wouldn't say entertained, but if you give me nothing, I'm dying there. So if you're able to relate to people, and you know, that doesn't mean you have to be this extrovert who's always all singing, all dancing, knows it all or anything. You can be shy, you can be introvert, you can be yourself, but you can be polite, and you can, as Nikita was saying, show what you've done and what skills you possess. And most of us will have done something. Most of the time, I think when you get to that stage, you already will have some quite good academic skills, which is important. It's the basis for everything you will do. But then if you build on that with the interpersonal skills, so that, you know, it's something you can train. All of us can learn how to do it. For some, it comes easily. For others, it's a bit harder. For example, I didn't find it very hard talking like this to a panel of people. 30 years ago would have been impossible for me. I was just impossibly shy. So I had to teach myself to talk to people, to overcome shyness, to overcome the fear of, oh my God, what are they going to say when I come out with my opinions? It's not easy, but you can get there and you can do it. And when you do it, the reward for the other person you're talking to is just as great as for you. And yeah, I think if you're able to put yourself into the shoes of the other person, that really helps, I find, to then, you know, lose some of the fear and then become yourself and be able to talk a bit more freely. So interpersonal skills, sorry. The next one.
Just so you all know, Beatrice interviewed me, so 7 years ago. So obviously something went right. But just following on from those points, I think it is really important what Nikita said. But when you walk into that interview, obviously beforehand you should, you know, be prepared and turn up early, you know, have your suit ready, know where you're going, all those kind of real practical things. But on a different level, you have to walk in there selling yourself. There is nobody else doing that for you. There's no one else going to come in and sit down and say, this person's amazing. She's done this. You're that person. And I always think, you know, your CV got you that far. So they know your A-levels and your degree and where you've worked before and your experience. They know all of that. What they now want to know, and I've done interviews before, is I'm thinking, are they going to fit in the team? Will they fit into this team? And it's exactly what Beatrice said. It's how they come across in that interview. And you don't, you know, not everyone wants an extrovert in their team. Not everyone wants an introvert in their team, but you just have to go in there and be yourself. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I've applied for jobs that haven't worked out, but probably because I wasn't the right fit for that team, or the other way around. Like someone's interviewed me and I've thought, oh no, I don't like this person at all. This chemistry doesn't work here, because it is a two-way interview. Don't forget that, you know, you don't desperately want that job if that job isn't the right job for you. But I think you have to go in, you know, politely blowing your own trumpet, because that's what you're there to do. Like, and I think women find that very difficult. Very, very difficult. And if you hear a woman saying, oh, I've done this and I've done this and I've this, I think subconsciously we're like, oh, she's a bit full of herself. But actually she's not. She's just putting it out there, telling you what she is capable of doing. And I think we have to, you know, raise each other up. We have to like congratulate that person, because it should become normal for us to say, yeah, I've done this, and yeah, I've done that. And but women we do kind of just like to be in the shadows a bit, and we think of if someone else is doing it, that okay. But actually, I think the more we all kind of step forward and say, look what I can do, look what I can do, the more it becomes a bit more normal, actually. And the only other thing that I wanted to say is, although your CV gets you in there and it's interpersonal skills, don't underestimate how much common sense actually helps, because you'd be surprised how uncommon common sense is. And I have found that with trainees over the years, incredibly intelligent people, not an ounce of common sense. And it's difficult to work with someone who doesn't really have their finger on the kind of a day-to-day pulse. So I would just, don't underestimate just being who you are, saying something. If it doesn't feel right, say something. Because I've often thought, how did this person get through the interview system? I have no idea. But obviously it does happen. But I just think common sense, be prepared, and then the practical side of it, do the recce the day before, go on the train, figure it out, all that kind of stuff. But I think it just comes back to being who you are and singing your CV, tell them everything, because you've only got, an hour or whatever it is. So once you've got your foot in the door, just go for it. You've got nothing to lose. And it gets easier as the interviews go on.
It does. Yeah, I remember the first interview versus the one that I did 7 months ago for this job. Very, very different, Rashmi. We actually did a lot of graduate interviews, and I've had a couple of graduates join a couple of months ago on my team as well. So this is very top of mind. And one of the discussions that we had about was like, what kind of skills do we look for? Because everybody has a different background, so you can't expect like specific skills. Like payments is not a reasonable, expectation for anyone. So I think what we sort of, or at least what I look for in an interview is, like, as you all said, like know the company, know what they do, just read up a little bit on them. If they ask you like, how does this company make money, just have an answer for it. Those kind of like very, very simple things that you can read up on. But beyond that, I think two things that I look for is curiosity and willingness to learn, because most companies, and WorldPay included, have a lot of trainings and programs and everything for graduates. So we don't necessarily expect people to come with Excel skills or PowerPoint skills or whatever it is, Tableau. None of that is expected, because there are people who will train you for it. The first 6 months, I don't even expect anybody on my team to deliver anything, because it's like you're learning payments, you're learning 4-point system, and I don't know, a whole bunch of things that you're supposed to learn. But it's like you need to be able to have that willingness. Like, I don't know this looks scary, but I want to learn. I don't know what Tableau is. It looks just there's a lot of colors and whatever, but I have the mentality to go in and ask questions and figure this out on my own or with help. And the second thing is like curiosity. Ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask questions. And I find it so refreshing in interviews. When I ask a question, they may not have the answer. It's like, I don't know, but they ask question, tell me about it. I want to learn about it. And they ask follow-up questions. And that's an indication that this is a complex industry and there's a whole lot to learn, a lot of products and stuff like that. So if you do have mentality to say, I want to learn more about it, and I don't care if it's hard, I will try my best to learn before giving up. I think those are the two things I think are good for graduates. And we had an intern in the summer who was this woman from India, and her interview was so amazing. She asked all these questions and she was so curious, and she had this like, I want to know everything, tell me everything about WorldPay. And we're going to have her back next year. So I think that if you can show that, demonstrate that you will bring that curiosity and that willingness to learn, I think that'll set you up for success.
I was actually going to say ask questions. That was something that I was thinking of saying, because I think when I first started my job, something that one of my managers said to me was, there's no such thing as a stupid question. So I was very like, I was quite shy. I didn't want to come across as, oh my God, this girl does not know anything. Why is she asking me all these questions? But I think genuinely, coming from, the education system and having all this work experience and everything, like, it's the day and age when everyone sort of has that. So it's like you say, like everyone sort of knows what's on your CV. Everyone's got a degree. Everyone's got, you know, something. And almost when you go to apply for jobs, especially in the current grad market, there's a danger of sort of doing, you know, 5 or 6 applications in a day and coming across kind of like a robot. So you've, you know, sort of repeated your answers for every single company you've applied for. And I think asking questions, you know, just shows your interest about, you know, wanting a career in finance or wanting a career in the particular company. You know, finding out a little bit, it's like what Beatrice said, finding out about the actual interviewer themselves, you know, trying to develop a relationship with them, because if you know, get chosen to join the company, this could be somebody that you're going to be working with, and you want to be able to have that relationship with them so that when you go and approach them, they want to help you. They don't want to, you know, not waste their day talking to you. So definitely ask questions, and you know, nothing stupid. Everyone's learning every day. Like, it doesn't matter what role you're in. So just have that sort of willingness to sort of put in the work and put in the effort to actually learn about things that you're doing.
I second that, of course. If I may add just something, if there's someone who wants to get into banking, specifically in investment, I would suggest to look into the CFA. It's, you know, it's not necessary. I don't have it, but I do see a lot of grads come in and they already have it, or they're finishing it, and a lot of banks will pay for you to get it in your first years and will also give you study leave. But I do think while you're at university, it's so easy because you're studying exactly the same things, and there's a bit of cost to sit the exam, of course, but you know, you go into an interview and you've already set for the first exam, for example, or you just say you're a candidate and you're going to sit for it. And you know, Shanita was talking about this competition in the grad market. That is my tip to basically any graduate I meet. That's the one thing you can add to your CV. And in terms of work, it doesn't add too much, I think, to your studying when you're at university, at least. You know, if you start studying for it when you're at work and you're trying to make the most of your work day, and then on top you have to study, you will find it bit much harder. You know, okay, they give you study leave, but it's not the same as doing it when you're at university. So yeah, that's my tip.
Wow, thank you all. I think this was really, really helpful. And just talking about questions, if students have any questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to your questions soon. So yeah, start thinking about it, or if you'd like to just to raise your hand and unmute yourself, you're also very welcome to. Okay, we already have one actually. So, would you recommend starting a job immediately after graduation, or would you advise to get a master's first? This is another really good point, as some of the students here are maybe third year or second year thinking about whether to do a master's. What's your take?
Okay, personally, I would say you're young only once, so make the most of your youth. People graduate so early in this country as well. You know, I started working, I was like 25, 26, and people were telling me, you're so young, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm so behind compared to all the people around me. But actually that doesn't come back. The fun that you can have when you're like 22, 23 and you're studying or traveling or doing something with that. Personally, I would say if you can, you know, like, yeah, okay, if you need to go to work, fine. But if you can avoid that, postpone it. Do something else. Do a master's, fine. Do 1 year volunteering somewhere. Do travel, whatever, before going into and working. Because once you start working, you think, I can always take a sabbatical or whatever. It doesn't really happen. It's not that people don't give it to you, but life happens and you're like, okay, I can do this, I can do that, but I can still go on holiday, and it doesn't happen. Like the lightness that you have when you're in your early 20s, like you should just make the most of it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Silvia. I think I'm now I've arrived at the other end where, you know, my children are old enough, they take care of themselves, and you sort of think, oh, maybe I'll have a year off now. But it gets later and later, and you realise you haven't had time off. But I think if you're going to do a master's, think about what sort of master's you're going to do. Make it count, because it's actually quite a hard year. You're developing your studies, and you're going to have to put in a lot of work. You're going to have to spend a lot of time with it. So make sure you choose something you actually really like, and then ideally choose something that might be useful for the direction you might like to take. That is probably secondary, but remember, you spend a lot of time with that master's, and as Silvia says, your life is precious. So don't waste it just because you think, I must have a master's, I must have it, otherwise I won't get taken anywhere. That's not true. I think you get into, they're really good jobs, and so many fantastic people I've come across in this line of work have got relatively few academic qualifications. Sorry, I have to check myself. They have great life skills and great qualifications in life skills, but relatively few academic ones. I think I've even come across people who've left school at 16 and are running, their own companies, multi-million companies, and you can do that. But if you are going to go and do a master's, make it count.
Yeah,
you can do it.
Sorry,
Beatrice.
go ahead.
Oh, oh no.
No, go ahead.
Apologies. I was going to say, Beatrice, you can do it. Do your master's. Now's the time. Whatever it is.
Well, no. I do quite. The problem is, I do quite like my job. So.
Fair enough. I was going to say, I think it really depends on the individual and your career direction that you want to take, right? So I would say there are certain industries where having a master's or a PhD or some sort of higher education and specialization is necessary. Like I did engineering, aerospace engineering, and having a PhD was almost necessary for you to get something important, I guess, or to get a job that was like rewarding enough. And I decided that I don't want to spend any additional time in something that I was not sure about. So I ended up not doing any sort of further education in that. So if you know what you want, if you know your industry and this is your passion and you figured it out and you think that is going to give you additional educational qualification, do it. But I would say if you're not sure and you just did something that was fine and you're going into a whole new industry, you can use masters as a way to pivot. So like I don't know, start out as a engineer or something, product manager, and then you want to pivot into strategy. An MBA or some sort of master's in business can open a lot of doors for you later in life. Or you do, I don't know, in my MBA, we had a lot of teachers and other, people from a lot of different backgrounds come in. And then the reason they did that master's is less so for the master's and more so for the connections and the opportunity to then explore things and go into a whole different area. So I would say it is a way for you to pivot, and oftentimes it's expensive, particularly if it's not a sponsored thing, or like, on the business side of things, it tends to be expensive. So I would say that if you're not sure, maybe it's worth waiting a bit of time, because you'd have more savings as you work, you can save up for it. Your company may sponsor it in the future. Some companies do offer that sponsorship. So it's worth keeping that option. But again, if you know what you're doing and if you know what kind of masters you want, then by all means you can do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Rashmi just mentioned. Don't do a master's just for the sake of it, I guess, in some ways. So I know when I was in my final year, which again was only 2 years ago, or so, a year and a half now, quite a few of my friends were applying for a job and they weren't successful. So they said, well, there's nothing else to do now. I'm just going to do a master's because I don't want a gap in my CV. I don't want, employers to think that I've not been doing anything for a year. But I think it's only relevant to do that master's if, one, it's something that you're really interested in, you really want to learn about. But, as one of you also mentioned earlier, if it's relevant to what you're going into. So one of my friends did a master's in business analytics, which was very coding heavy, because he knew that was the kind of area that he wanted to go into. He was super interested in coding and he learned a lot from it. He took a lot out of it. But for me, I knew there wasn't anything that I wanted at this point in my life to gain from a master's. So I went straight into the job market. It's very different for each person. And, even if you do take a year out after graduating university, it's not the end of the world. And actually, you can do a lot in that year, whether it's traveling and, in an interview, you could talk about all of the life experiences that you gained whilst you were traveling. It's not sort of frowned upon in any way, as long as you can, show that you've grown this past year. You've not just sat down and watched TV doing nothing, but that you've grown yourself and improved yourself in the past year. And whether that's through a master's or volunteering or traveling or part-time work, there's so many ways you can go about it. But yeah, don't just do it because there's nothing else to do and you need something else for this next year of your life, because it is very expensive as well. It is a very hefty fee for a lot of universities, so it's something that you should take into consideration whether it's actually useful for you.
I can only speak from my own experience, but when I finished my law degree, the next step was to go to law school, and so I was applying to go to law school as I was doing my finals, and I remember getting through my finals, which I still remember being incredibly difficult. And I remember being on the phone to my dad at one point, just crying my eyes out, thinking I can't do another year of this. I just can't do any more studying. And so I had this long chat with my parents, and they were like, well, can you defer your place? So I deferred my place at law school for a year. And actually the pressure that came off me at that point, as in like, okay, I don't have to go straight to law school. And loads of people were going straight to law school. And at that point I was 21 or 22. And I remember thinking, oh, have I made the right decision? Is everyone going to be ahead of me now? And blah, blah. It was like 1 year. And so I got a job in the legal department at a construction company, which is, I don't do anything to do with construction now, but it was a great year. I did like an in-house role for about 6 months, and I saved up all the money that I had. And then I bought a ticket to Southeast Asia with my friend, and I went there for 4 months, and it was probably one of the best things I've ever done. And exactly like Silvia said, you are only young once. And so if you can kind of balance the kind of, okay, I wanted to go to law school, I wanted to become a lawyer, I wanted to do that, I just didn't want to do it right then. And I think probably, I probably wasn't even thinking it when I was 21, but from a mental health perspective, I needed a break. I could not have gone into the next thing. I think I probably would have had a breakdown. But having that year away, getting some work experience to see how it works practically in the office. And then I got on a plane and went and sat on a beach and, learned how to cook Thai food and, walked around temples and all that kind of stuff. And actually that's really, it grounds you as a person. Because I was still quite young, and I think it's great to go off and you can make it work in your CV. Like if I saw a CV now and someone said they've been traveling for 18 months, honestly, I'm jealous. I'm thinking, oh, I wish I would have done that. I wish that was me. I only went for 4 months, that kind of. So don't worry about that. It's very common now. Nobody, like, I don't think anyone would look at that in a bad way. But then I came back, and then I went to law school, and actually I was ready for it, and actually I wanted to go back. I did always have that thing in the back of my mind of, if I take a year off, will I be able to get back into studying again? But it's like a year and you're fine. You go straight back in again and it's not a problem. But I kind of would echo what everyone else said. As long as it's something that is going to add to your CV, is going to add to you, because it was incredibly expensive to go to law school. But I needed that step. Otherwise I couldn't get any further up the ladder. So it is a kind of a way up. But if you're working whilst you're trying to make these decisions in the background, or you go and do a bit of traveling and a bit of working, you can pick up these skills whilst you're even working in a pub or working as a waitress, or if you get a part-time role doing something else. There are always skills that you can take from that job and be creative in your CV, ham it up a bit. But I mean, if you want to do a master's, go ahead, go straight into it. But I would just weigh it up, and if you need some time, then just take the time, is what I'd say.
I think it's pretty similar to what Nikita and Siobhan just said. I think there's no right answer to that question, to be honest, because it kind of just depends on your individual preference. I know people that did masters for the sake of doing a masters, and I also know people that did masters because they actually wanted to do it. And I think it's I'm not sure what it is. I think it's just, you know, people think there's a right way to do life. Like, you know, you go to school and then you go to university and then you get a job or you do a master's or whatever, but it's not actually like that. And I think whatever experience you get, if you want to take a year out or whatever, it's whatever you make of it. Like, I know someone who wanted to do a master's because, you know, they didn't get the degree result that they wanted to. So they thought, okay, let me do a master's and boost it up a little bit, because when employers look at my CV, that's what they're going to see. They're going to see that I didn't get a 2-1, so I need to do a master's to spruce it up, because that's better than taking a year out. And then it ended up being a pandemic and half the world took a year out. So, you know, it was very, you know what I mean? There's no like, oh, you have to do something because a lot of people are doing it or it's what's expected of you, because any experience that you get is always going to help you, whether that's going to a different country and traveling, or, you know, working at Tesco for a year. Like, there are so many things that are so different. It's all about what you can bring and not what you think you should be doing, because there's no right path to follow. And I know people that, you know, I was one of those people that was like, oh, I'm not doing another year of studying, I can't handle it, it's a master's, and now I'm studying for an accounting qualification. So story kind of wrote itself. But I know, like, you can't really there's a lot of things that you can't really plan for, because sometimes, you know, opportunities come up that you don't expect to. So don't just go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to do a master's in, I don't know, economics because I want to work for this bank at this state in this country, because, you know, not to be negative, but, you know, there's lots of things that can happen. So always do things for the right reason, I guess. Probably what I'd say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. So there have been a few more questions in the chat. The first one is, do any of your companies provide mentoring opportunities, year-long placements, or summer internships? And with this one, if we could do maybe a quick round, if you could let us know about your company's student programs, and then we move on to the other questions.
Yeah, I'll take this. 24 Asset Management does have, we have posted graduate jobs opportunity actually on Twitter. If you follow our account, you can go and have a look at that. And we, of course, we had a summer internship program as well. So it's like potentially not advertised broadly on our website, but definitely we're in touch with Queen Mary. And if you go through your students department, you know, hiring department, I'm sure they will be in touch with the right people at my firm.
Yeah, I think we do as well. And again, I think the website is probably where you need to go.
Barclays also does any summer internship and graduate roles. The good thing is there's loads of different divisions that you can intern in, other than just finance, if that's not something you want to do. There's some very specific parts as well, cards and payments, the corporate bank, the investment bank. Again, that's all on the website, and also on the careers page, there's videos of current graduates and their experiences that you can hear from firsthand. And, you know, if you are an intern, you usually get assigned a mentor to you as well, that you can speak to. But yeah, definitely there are opportunities.
We have a 10-week, I think, paid internship, and we also have a graduate program, a couple of years, again, quite structured and rotation and all of that. I was just pinging the recruiter to make sure that I had the most relevant information, and she said, for mentoring, I think we can partner if this is something that students are interested. There's always flexibility in making sure that we provide whatever students need. So, you know, if there's a lot of students who are interested in anything, just you can either reach out to me or Ruby, who's also on the call, and we can see if we can structure something for it.
I know Santander also has opportunities. In finance, we don't have, I don't think there's an internship right now, but there are loads of graduate roles. But in all different areas like CTB, audit, things like that, there are internships. And there's also off-cycle programs as well, because I think people always, think that, once they come out of university, you always have to apply in your final year, and then you always have to start in September. But there are loads of off-cycle programs as well. So say if you want to do something, after you graduate from September, there's always roles that you can apply to that start in like January or March or whatever. So have a look at the website, and I'm sure there's loads of opportunities on there.
Brilliant, thank you. So the websites are a good starting point. Moving on to the next question. The finance world always seems like a good old boys club. Will it impact one's progress in a firm if you don't like to go out drinking with the boys or talking about sports, etc.? The politically correct answer is no, but is that truly the case? Who would like to answer this?
It totally is an old boys club. Sorry, guys. Yeah. But we can fight back. And I think we all do in our own little ways. I mean, some friends and I, we set up a few years back a group called Women in Export Finance, because, the export finance world was such a boys club where you had to go and play golf and drink beer and go to football matches. And if you don't play golf, you don't like beer, and you don't feel comfortable at football matches, it seemed a bit like nothing was happening for you. So you just set up your own club, and you go to the theatre, or you go to concerts, or you do whatever you want to do and find other women, I think. Or it doesn't actually have to be women, because we set up Women in Export Finance and all of a sudden found that quite a few men wanted to join as well, because they liked the idea of a sort of, beer-free networking event in the finance world. I don't think it'll necessarily always impact your career. You can have a career without being part of the old boys network. I don't think anyone here, none of you guys look like you are, and some of you have got a career and are looking well on their way to a career. So, you can work around it. It's still there, and you can ignore it and set up your own, or if you're that way inclined, play with it. But I think there are enough routes now to make your own way to get, to the top, get to where you want to be without utilizing it. Just don't get angry about it being there. It's not worthwhile, I think. It's just a fact of life. And if you just take it and think, well, I do my own thing and I'll get where I want to be, I think that works best. No? Anyone else's experience?
Slightly
Yeah,
different.
I'd say
sorry.
I've been at the pub. I've been at the pub with the boss. It's fun, you don't need to be always there. You don't need to learn sports. You don't need to. I've still not learned one single thing of cricket, and I know a little bit of rugby just because the guys look really nice. But you can just be there, make the most of it. When I joined, at some point because of the crisis, they moved me into the UK team, and the guys were like, "We're actually going to the pub. Do you want to come?" And I was the girl who was sitting there with their cheesecake, and they were having the pint, and we had a great time. You don't need to have a pint all the time. It's just part of socializing. They socialize that way. It's pretty boring, fine, but you can use it.
I'm doing a month of no drinking now. Started end of October, just preparing for Christmas. So I hope it's not you need to drink and go out, because I haven't been doing that. And when you're sober at 11, you actually go home and have a good night's sleep. So it's been really, really great. I would recommend everyone to take like a month off to see what happens. But I think I've been quite very, very lucky, because when I, initially got this job, I thought it would be very male dominated, just because, the most technology, payments, whatever, that have their reputation. But my boss's organization, 70% women. All of my peers, directors who report to my boss, they're all women. There are 4 or 5 VPs out of the 7 that's like at my boss's level. So it's been like everywhere I look, there are women, not just women, there's like LGBTQ and people from different countries. So it's just not something that I'm consciously, like when I look around, it's just not a thing. And it's great because we do a lot of other things. Like we do exercise classes. We're doing a spin class today. And I've done like a boxing class before and axe throwing. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do to socialize with your team. Comedy show. We did, one of the women on my team organized a comedy show, which was really, really fun. Somebody else made us sit on the front row, so they were making fun of payments the whole time. It was hilarious. So I think there are so many other ways to socialize, so many other ways to get to know your team, and you are free to, suggest those things. And I would also say that there are a lot of companies, and at least people within companies, that are conscious of these things and actively trying to make change. So if you go into a company and feel like it's absolutely an all boys club, I can't do anything about it. Everyone, everywhere I look, it's a man, and they're all going and talking about football or whatever. Leave. There are so many other companies and so many other places, and you have control over your career. Don't feel like you have to stay in a place and suffer through it, because you do have options, and there are people and women and leaders that do want to make that change. So I'd say things are changing, things are looking up, so hopefully this is not going to be an issue in the near future. Who knows?
Thank you.
I would 100% agree with you, Rashmi. It is changing and it is getting better. And I don't think that you don't have to drink alcohol, but if they're going to the pub, then go, because it is a way to actually get people out of the office, people's personality change out of the office, and you can just have a conversation. You can get on a level with them. You may have been to the same holiday, you may have live in the same area, or went to the same university or something like that, and it's just a way to kind of get that connection. And who cares if you're drinking a mocktail or a cocktail? Like, it doesn't bother me whether somebody's drinking or not. It shouldn't bother anyone else whether I'm drinking or not. Like, if you're there and you have something to say and you can hold a conversation, then definitely go. Unfortunately, that old boys club is going to be there for some time, but hopefully most of them are going to start to retire soon, and we can all take over. Yeah, I think go and be yourself.
Thank you. I think that is very refreshing to hear, that you don't necessarily have to fit in, but you can, as you said, just be yourself. So in the interest of time, because we have only 5 minutes left, I'll move on to the next question, which is, at the start of your careers, how did you find the work-life balance? For example, how often did you find yourself working long hours? And if I can ask maybe specifically Shanita and Nikita to comment on this, because obviously you are at the start of your career. So how is that going for you both?
So starting as a graduate last year, I think I probably started in a slightly different way, because like Shanita, I'm also studying for my accounting qualification. So a lot of my evenings go towards studying for all these exams that come every few months. What I have found is it is very much dependent on the culture of your team, and also the organization and how they instill it and how it trickles down to you. I've been very fortunate that whenever I've had a conversation with my manager about, okay, I've got these exams coming up, I won't be working later than 5 o'clock. He makes sure I log off, and you have your evening to study or do whatever you want to do. And I think it's just really important to have that communication there from the start, because if you don't speak up, then no one's going to know what you're going through and what support you need. And again, just putting exams to one side, I think that the communication part is still important. If you are noticing you're logging off at crazy hours every day, you need to make that heard, because it's not sustainable in the long run if it's happening a lot of the time. I mean, given during year end for me last year, it's a very busy period, but we're warned of that beforehand. We're told between January and February you're going to be working fairly late, because there is a lot to do, and you can plan your time around that. That this is coming up and you'll be working late, but then after those 2 months you have a bit of a quiet period. So it is quite cyclical for me in that sense. In my current role, I've been quite fortunate that I've not worked later than 6:30 or 7, and that's been on like a bad day. So it does depend on the role. And I think going into the role, if you're in an interview, just feel free to ask, what is a standard day like? What are the expectations of the graduate coming in? And if it's not something that fits you, then that's fair enough. But just getting that idea, I think, is important beforehand, so that you're not going into something and then you find out, oh goodness, I'm not able to manage this all. I should have asked this beforehand, or I should have scoped out the role a bit more beforehand.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what Nikita said, to be honest. I mean, I started the graduate program last year, and well, it was COVID, and I've been into the office once in 2 years because, you know, you just couldn't go to the office last year. So I think something that I guess students probably might, especially, you know, if they want to go into accounting and do an accounting qualification, I know lots of companies are now moving on to like a hybrid style of working. So, you know, 2 days in the office and then 3 days at home or whatever. So say if you do have an exam coming up and you're very much a homebody, you do a lot more work at home, then maybe talk to your manager and come up with, you know, a schedule that suits you. So maybe the 2 days that, you know, you think, like, I don't know, like a Monday and Friday or whatever, you want to go into the office, and Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday you can sort of, you know, work from the comfy of your own home and then log off a little bit earlier and then do some work. And also I think very much like Nikita, my role is quite cyclical. So month end and year end, you know that you're going to be working late. There's no way around it, unfortunately. But then towards, you know, time when it's not the beginning of the month or whatever, like I did last month when it wasn't month end, my manager actually told me to log off. It was like 30th of the month or something, and there wasn't much to do, and she was like, take the day to study because you've been working so late. So that as well really helps. And I remember like in my last rotation, my manager was very much, if I had an exam coming up, I think if I was there past 5 o'clock, she would kick me out and she'd be like, okay, what are you still doing here? Can you go now, please? So it's very much, you kind of, I think once you first start, it's a little bit daunting because you're not really used to, you know, working and then for like long periods of time. But it's just about finding whatever suits you and planning your day around, you know, if you know what your schedule is going to be like, just planning your day around that. But it's not as bad as it seems.
That's good to know. Thank you. Final question, and apologies that we are running over for a few minutes. So this is from a student who doesn't have a background in finance. So she's asking, as a humanities student, BA in German and politics, how can I make my applications in finance more appealing beyond demonstrating independent interest, such as having done online courses in, for example, fintech? And thank you all so much for this talk. It's been very informative and valuable, which I can only agree with. So if I can have maybe one or two of you commenting on this, that would be great.
So I can only just go back to the point that I made earlier about looking into the CFA. If you don't have a background, it can be a little bit harder for you, but in particular because of that, I mean, if you show that you're interested as so much that you have started looking into the CFA, which I think it's Charter for Financial, I don't remember what the A stands for, but it's essentially like it's a three exams course that qualification. It's a qualification. It's a bit like the accounting qualification that Shanita was talking about. This is specific for portfolio management and investment. You show that you're interested, and it gives you a very good background, because what I find is it's great to have like a very diverse graduate pool in a way. I've been working with graduates of history in the past, and unfortunately they were struggling. There was this guy who was really good, but it was too much for him because he had to catch up with so many things that he ended up going into, I think he became went into becoming a solicitor, because you know, there's a lot of basic things that you need to know. You need to know what the a balance sheet looks like. You need to know how to calculate an income, what EBITDA is. You need to know all these sort of things. And you know, I think if you get some stronger background, it will help you not just for the interview, but just for day to day. I would suggest that look into it. Or any other sort of qualification, you know, non-university qualification.
I've just got a really tiny point to put in. I would play to your strengths and apply to German banks. Like if you've done a BA in German and you can speak German, there's loads of people that can't. So apply to the positions where a German speaker would be preferable.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Siobhan. I think don't focus on what you don't have. Focus on what you've got. You've got something that nobody else or not that many other people have. So focus on it, make the best of it, and just go for where you think you can play to your strengths. Everybody can learn things like what about, I'm a lawyer. I know how to interpret balance sheets, and I work with financial definitions every day. These things you can learn. I agree, it's daunting when you don't know it, but you can learn it. But for the purposes of applying somewhere, always play to your strengths. Look not what don't I have, look what have I got and how can I make up. These people I always like when they then walk into an interview, because they are usually the ones who've thought about what they can bring to the table, to the team, and quite often they turn out to be the strongest. We like I said, Siobhan and I are in a law firm, but a lot of the people we've got there are originally non-lawyers. We've got master mariners, we've got engineers, we've got people from, I think the pharmacist was a colleague, her degree was in pharmacy, completely different, but they work really well. And I think that's what makes finance so interesting, because you do get people like Rashmi, who comes from aerospace engineering, and just swap across. And I'm sure you've got skills nobody else has, and you can still use.
Thank you. I think this is a really nice way of finishing also today's event, when you just said, don't focus on what you don't have, but focus on what you got, because you all can bring something, and that goes back again to what Nikita was saying earlier. So show off when you go to the interview, when you have that moment where you can show off your abilities a little. Well, thank you. We've come to the end of this event. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I think it was really a really valuable moment for all the students joining, and for all of those who will watch this recording later. Thank you for sharing very openly your experience and giving our students some tips and some advice to sort of start off their career in finance. Thanks again, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emanuela.
Thanks.